Did you ever get caught up in fads and styles? Sure you did. We all did, and it wasn't always pleasant. When I was a kid, we wore the clothes that were given to us by our parents. And that doesn't mean we were poor and survived on hand-me-downs. It just means that if our parents handed you something to wear, you wore it. There was never any chance of picking what you liked. We had no say. And there were times when my mother would come across a treasure trove of what she called bargains. They might have been a little garish, something that nobody else would dare to wear, but if it kept you warm or covered your butt, you would wear it, like it or not. And then along came something called peer pressure, and everything changed. People started wearing certain styles. It usually happened at the change of seasons when everybody suddenly was wearing madras shirts and powder blue jeans. It was subtle in my day, and keep in mind, my wardrobe was still determined by the budget and was entirely out of my hands. The only time I can remember ever even talking about the trends, the conversation ended abruptly with my mother saying, "When you pay for it, you can wear whatever you want." Well, by the time I became a parent, it was almost out of my hands again. That peer pressure to follow the fads had seized my kids, and they would rather die than report to school with something that I bought. And while I understood peer pressure, I did not fully grasp that it was a thing that had grown to take over the world. In the 60s, you had to wear a brand called TKs with their particular style and shades of cotton pants. That's right, just simple cotton pants. They look like any cotton twill pants, kind of like jeans, but not denim. And within a few weeks of the fad, all the other manufacturers had copied them. But that's when peer pressure turned ugly. People were demanding TKs, willing to pay more because nothing else would do. The kids were actually inspecting the label to find the real McCoy. This was the birth of conspicuous consumption. That is, wearing something that was conspicuous about its status. That went hand in hand with price. The higher the price, the more demanding the peer pressure. We went through the 80s and 90s where designers fought for conspicuous space to parade their names. None greater than some guy named Tommy. Everything he produced would bear his name, not yours. A simple t shirt would have his name across your chest in letters so big they emerged from one armpit only to disappear into the other. It was even worse when he emblazoned his last name on your apparel, because it was a longer name that sometimes had to be printed vertically up and down your body. Some merchandisers were so powerful, all they had to do was change a color. Levi's, yeah, the famous jeans makers. They marketed their products with the tiniest visible label called a tab. It was simply sewn into a seam somewhere, barely half an inch. The tab simply named the company. But that company, it became such a hot property that it went through seasons when only a red tab was acceptable. And woe be you if you were caught wearing an orange tab, Levi's, because, well, that was so last year. Today's generation has given up on such conspicuous consumption. And I would like to think they've decided not to be swayed by so called fashion. After all, how many ways can you design a t shirt or a purse? Today's fashionistas brag more about what they saved than who supposedly designed it. If I thought peer pressure had finally died, I would celebrate. But alas, there is nothing to celebrate, I fear. Today's peer pressure is far more sinister. Today, people are wooed by evil politicians, by conspiracies, by entirely new bandwagons. And while peer pressure is alive in our society today, it is leading us down dark paths, the likes of which that Tommy fella never dreamed. At least, that's my view. I'm Bill Martin.